I don't know which one of you may or may not feel comfortable speaking, but maybe to start, if you could just sort of characterize for us the last difficult 9 days that you've spent. Give us a little snapshot or a little narrative of what the basic storyline was as you went through the case.
That's vague.
I'll answer. Well, there was a lot of evidence, and it all wasn't black and white. It was a lot of grays. So I can't really give you a timeline for how things went, but we just had a lot of stuff to sort through and decide about, and it was difficult, and it was long, and it was complicated.
Anyone else want to respond to that?
She summed it up. It was, I don't think, we didn't have a timeline for any particular thing. We actually went back and forth
on all of them,
on everything, and we just want to make sure that we went through everything, and I think we said we didn't want to leave any stone unturned.
When did you make a decision on the not having the murder charge? Was that at the end, or were you talking about that all the way, or?
That was today.
That was today.
We talked about it the whole time.
Well, we talked about it from day one. I mean, really, that was every day. I think we talked about it.
So, just so I understand, did you take one charge at a time for one defendant at a
We've
time?
gone back and forth with all of it.
Okay. So it wasn't like, okay, let's take Mr. Springer's charges and we'll go through all of those and decide those, and then we'll go to Mrs. Springer's charges.
We went through the charges, and then we went Mrs. Springer and Mr. Springer,
Right.
or vice versa. I mean, but it was by charge, not by defendant.
Did you have on the two other counts, the child abuse first degree and the torture, were those, I don't want to say easy because none of this is easy, but easier for you to make a determination on? I mean, how many days would you say it took you to decide those two versus coming down to what are we going to do on this felony murder?
Well, child abuse was decided in
2 days.
2 days. Torture took
a long
longer.
time.
We spent a day on torture.
Until a couple days ago, actually.
Yeah.
Why was torture longer?
It's more elements. It's the elements are,
Worded a lot different.
yeah.
Okay.
And there's a lot of emotion in that word, and so it took a long time to set aside our own our own thoughts of what torture meant and look at what the law said. That took a long time. That was very difficult.
Did all the paperwork that you received, the exhibits and all this notebook full of stuff, was that confusing or was that helpful?
No,
Very
helpful.
I couldn't imagine doing it without it.
I know, without our notebooks and being able to take the notes, I think we all agree that coming up with any kind of decision, trying to remember all the facts, and we went off of each other's notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was very helpful.
Yes.
What was your overall feeling about the jury reform, specifically being able to ask questions?
I think that was crucial.
I thought it was a
That was-
very good opportunity for us to get the questions answered that we needed to know,
Because
that the attorneys didn't ask.
And you don't have to answer this, but I know another consideration with the jury reform is that provided you were all together outside of the court, you could still discuss the case. Did you ever do
Correct.
that?
Correct.
Yeah, we did that. We put
a little
puzzles
bit.
together and kind of
talked
bounce
through it.
ideas off of each other. Before we deliberated, we didn't really everybody say how we felt about anything, but we just kind of bounced ideas. I think we dabbled.
Yeah,
We
didn't
noted things that
really
were interesting,
deliberate,
and
but we would talk about things and just bring up things that interested us in the case.
Let's take torture. What were the key elements in your reaching the decision to find them guilty of torture? Can you remember what key things led you to that verdict?
Wow, that's a difficult one.
Yeah, it is.
I think
Yeah.
that if you look at the second element and the results of a lot of the actions, it was easy to see that it was that some of these actions were torturous. It's the intent that really was the hang up in coming up with the intent. I mean, that was really the hanging point for me.
That was the hanging point for quite a few days.
What convinced you on the intent?
we reread the definition, or I'm sorry, we reread the
All of the
instructions to the jurors and what jumped out at us was how intent can be proven.
Were you looking at the part where it says, did intend to commit torture, or were you looking at the part where it said knowingly create a situation? Were you looking at it from those two
That,
parts?
well,
Torture-
that wasn't in torture.
No,
actually.
torture
It's-
was only intent.
Yeah, it said intended to cause cruel or inhumane, a cruel or extreme physical or mental pain and suffering. There was no knowingly. So it was just the intent to cause.
When you requested Tony Springer's testimony, was that helpful, or
It was helpful.
how
It
did
was
you feel
helpful. It was
about it?
very
It was
helpful.
very
Was it-
helpful.
were you able to hear him the first time in the, it seemed like some people were struggling during the trial to hear what he was saying.
I don't
We
think
could
that it
hear
was
him.
we were struggling to hear what he was saying,
Yes.
as much as how long it took, the process took. By the time you go in to deliberate, there's a lot of key elements that you forget. So it helps when you take the second look at it.
And when there's that much that one person is saying, it's hard to get everything down. And so some of us had half of a sentence or had half of the thought, and others might have had the other half, but maybe they didn't. And we needed that on a few topics.
Do you believe Tony's testimony that they only restrained them for 2 or maybe 3 days with the chain?
No.
I personally, myself, no.
None of you.
No.
What was the most difficult testimony for you personally to hear?
I think the evidence of the pictures were the most difficult for me. The pictures and all the evidence that we got on the Tuesday stick with me. Even the smell of some of the evidence.
How so? Can you elaborate
Just
on
the
that?
smell of fire. It's,
Makes it more real.
yeah, it made it much more real. Yeah, that was my worst, personally, my worst night. It was our actually first night.
I would say it was the testimony of one of the professionals that just gave me a sinking feeling in my heart.
And did you, a lot of times in trials, you know, in rape cases and other kinds of cases like this, people will say, well, it almost looks like the victim comes off as being the villain in the case. Did you feel any of that in this case? I mean, did you feel that there was any attempt to try to make Callista look responsible for what happened?
No.
I do.
I think
absolutely.
there was an attempt to make her look that way, but
Look like
I
it
don't
didn't.
feel that Callista was a villain.
It didn't work.
No.
She said it didn't work.
Me.
I mean, did you expect that, or, and so you just sort of discounted anyway, or
No, I
did
think
they not
that-
do a good job of
I think
painting that picture?
I mean, speaking for me, I definitely took into consideration everything that the Mr. Springer and maybe the people that were closer to them had to say, but when it came right down to it, the people she knew at school, I mean, it wasn't a consistent testimony. It just wasn't consistent,
There
and you
wasn't enough
can't.
evidence.
There wasn't enough evidence from people outside of the situation.